Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast with Eric, Wolf, and Ashi Vale, where we help you become a better industry professional by gaining inspiration from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. With each episode, we meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. And now for today's episode. This month's episode is brought to you by Food Travel Talk TV, a new, live, online talk show dedicated to the food and beverage travel trade. Today we'll be speaking with Ewan Henderson, the man behind Hendo Talks, a drinks industry professional and Scottish food champion. He's from Glasgow, Scotland, and currently there in lockdown. He's well-traveled in Europe and Asia and is working his way across the USA to seek out the best dive bars and foodie experiences. Ewan made his name as the molecular magician by pairing Scotch whiskey with food at a molecular level. His end game is to provide pairing confidence and entertain audiences around the globe. He works in Scotch whiskey and rum, and don't get him talking about the terroir of rum. He could go on for hours. He's a keen hiker, desperate to be let loose once the Scottish Highlands are opened again. You can learn more about him at hendotalks.com. Welcome, Ewan.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Ewan, I understand that you also go by Hendo. Is that a nickname?
Yes, it is. Ewan is not so well known around in some parts of the world. So in Henderson is short for Hendo. This is what we sometimes use in British or Australian culture. So that's where I get the nickname from, and seems to have stuck over the years, you know.
Well, it's perhaps a little easier for some people to say, and that's obviously where you get the Hendo Talks from, right?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Okay. Well, that makes sense because Hendo Talks, Hendo is talking to you, right?
Yeah, it's a funny one because Hendo is something that came out of a comedy sketch show in Scotland. Henderson is an arch nemesis as a character, and my friends latched onto that, and ever since, Henderson, that was me.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. You have a namesake in the movies. I love it. That's excellent. Now, I was reading a little bit about you, and from what I was able to gather, it sounds like you're a consummate storyteller, and your love of sharing stories and the Scottish culture has been with you for several years. Is that right?
Yes, I guess coming from Scotland, we have folklore with stories in the past, and I grew up with scouting. I used to go in camps, campfire chats and stories of ghost stories in Scotland. So this was a rich part of the heritage I grew up in. So it's something that's gone throughout my life. I've spent a lot of time abroad, traveling the world from the times in my early 20s backpacking around Europe. And I picked up all these experiences around travel and added to it, and this is the stories that came to life as further down as I started to open some of the businesses that I had over the years, you know.
Right. And before the show, you were saying that food tourism was kind of something that you learned from working your way around Europe in your 20s.
Yeah, I guess I came in Scotland. We're maybe not so well known for the cuisines, like French cuisine and what have you. We have fantastic produce. But when I grew up, I wouldn't say that my mother was the best cook in the world. She was great at baking. But when I moved through travels, when I was backpacking across Europe, I was woken up to all these incredible food experiences in local markets. And also when I started to work in hospitality, when I was in the Greek islands, and these beautiful salads and fresh fish. And then in the winter months, I would work in Germany and learn some of the Germanic foods and experiences, the bratwurst at festivals and events. So it started to build from that, travel backpacking across in France and Spain, all these different places, turn up in villages and towns. And that's really what inspired me. When I came back home after these travels is when I started to think about continuing working in hospitality, because I trained as a chef in Germany in the hotel schools. And from there, when I came back home, I wanted to put my own stamp on things as part of being a massive foodie. So I worked for other people, saved some money up, and opened my first restaurant when I was 26 years old in 1999. And this had the influences of that time working in the Mediterranean with my business partner as a head chef at the time. these experiences of not necessarily using a menu as such, but bringing the fish to the table, letting the customer choose the seafood, having fantastic wines and cocktails, trying to replicate that holiday experience that people might be familiar with when they go to the Mediterranean countries. So the cuisine was French and Spanish, Italian and Greek and Turkish. We created all these different recipes. So it was quite phenomenal to bring that to Scotland back home. And it was in traditional steak pie country and outside Glasgow and Lanarkshire. So this was something quite different for the local community. This was really passion and excitement. I wanted to bring all these holiday snaps back home with me.
So you were 26 when you started your first restaurant. That must have been a huge learning curve, but I'm sure you learned a lot from that experience.
Yes, I certainly did. It was fascinating coming from the hospitality trained background in Germany and across other parts of Europe and working in vineyards in France, and then and seeing how it was in Scotland, how things were, how the processes, the food service, the links. This was quite young to be doing that kind of thing. 26 is terribly old now for people to start their first businesses. But at that time, photographs I have, I look like a small child. So yeah, it's quite funny looking back on these times. And I would continue with that experience because I wanted to develop after that and open another business which would become a delicatessen. So I took the food service experience, food to go, the recipes and these ideas, and then brought them into the city. So that's where I opened my second business, a delicatessen. But this would be another business that I hadn't actually done before. I'd learned through the trade, working up through the ranks with the restaurant. But with the delicatessen, I was going into retail as well as food service. So this was completely new territory. It was a bit of a theme for me throughout my life, is taking on businesses that I didn't necessarily know everything about, just because I wanted to feel the sense of adventure that was instilled in me at a young age. I loved the sense of adventure,
It's interesting that you had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit from a young age. And I think that maybe when we were younger, that was less of a thing. Today, everyone who's 18 or 11 years old, young people are having their own YouTube channels and their own Instagram accounts, and they're influencers, and they're already learning those business skills, if you will. Even in your mid 20s, that's phenomenal. Now, you must have learned a couple of really fantastic lessons. Could you share maybe a couple of things that you learned from opening your own restaurant and delicatessen at such a young age?
One of the key things was that I had a business partner who was the head chef. So I was strong front of house presence. I think for me, what suited me at the time was a partnership. Some people would go into business as the owner themselves and then hire from there. But because I was a younger business owner, I felt more comfortable having the experience of the older chef who was nearly 10 years older with a huge wealth of experience in cuisines, knowing how to run the kitchens. So for me, it felt like just being an extension of being a manager, but being an owner. Obviously, I was very lucky because my father was an accountant background, so he helped when it came to organising the books and looking at selecting accountants and banks and things like that. So, when the commercial side of nuance was something I had to learn. It was a big challenge back in the day to get involved in leases and large sums of money with the banks. The art of persuasion, the connections that you would have made a big influence. You couldn't just walk in off the street and start a crowd fund, so it was a different era well before the internet as such was prevalent. Yeah, I did have a laptop with Windows 95 on it, but it wasn't quite at the stages of building websites and what have you. So you had to rely heavily on local community and inspiring that local community. We did specific things. People you would regard as influencers today, we would look at some of the people in the community who maybe the high rollers, the big hitters, and we would invite the business owners. So we had a huge amount of people at opening parties, about 350 people. In Scotland, the phrase you would call talk of the steamy is, the talk of the town. So we were like the talk of the town at the time when we created this opening party and a real buzz about town, and putting a stamp on it from day one about what we were going to offer to invite people back. We collaborated with other businesses, so we knew that people would go to bars and clubs nearby. So we created an experience that tied in. So maybe you would have guest pass for the club along the road as part of the experience. We had to entice different generations of people in. And we would open quite cutely from Thursday to Sunday at the beginning, because Monday and Tuesday in more rural places wasn't really making money. So you would start off with your higher experiences. We'd do theme nights and find ways to really engage people, to bring them back. Because really, I think when you look back at that time, it was an era where going out for dinner was a unique experience. It would only happen like once a month, a payday experience. Nowadays, people would normally go out many times. The girls go out for lunch several times a week, lunch or dinner. So going out for dinner is a regular thing now, but back then it wasn't. So you had to find a way to try and hook people in more often. So this is what we did. And with that in mind, we found that even people like our suppliers, the top fishmongers in Glasgow, would be coming out to find out who was buying more seafood and shellfish within the top restaurants in Glasgow. And it was our small restaurant. We'd sit and have coffee with them and talk over ideas. So I was open to collaboration from that early age, but I would ride on the shoulders of giants and these knowledgeable experiences, having old hands. The people that we employed were very skilled. We didn't have a big workforce, but we chose and hand selected the best at what they were doing as an experience, and being able to communicate with the customers in such a way to build up relations and friendships that would last a long time. So we became the draw of the area. So all the other restaurants would come in and have dinner to see what the buzz was all about.
It sounds like you really hit the ground running. At 26, you started your own restaurant with your chef partner, and you really got yourself ingrained in the community. But sometimes when people are either too young or too old, they experience ageism. Did you experience anything where people didn't really take you quite seriously because you were a lad of only about 26 years?
Absolutely. I would say that people, older generation people that would come into the restaurant would ask to speak to the owner, and I would turn around and say, I'm the owner, and they would laugh at me, because like I said, the old photographs, I look very young for my age at the time. And yeah, it was kind of quite funny, because people are like that. They just assume that somebody's going to be older. So, but yeah, I kind of stood up to it and carried on. And it was just also because it was outside of the city. I think people in cities may be more open to it. Depends locations as well. But sometimes when you're further out of the city into the country, people sometimes have a view on how old people should be as an owner of a business and what have you as well. Just in that era, I think as well, just the type of people that were in that area, they would very much expect it to be a much older person that would be running the business.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about community, because you were saying before that you really got involved in the community. You would have coffee with the fishermen and so on. And you were saying earlier that you started a community sharing your travel recipes and sourcing directly from the artisanal producers and so on. But I think this idea of bringing people together is something that's kind of uniquely Ewan. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that rolls with you?
Yeah, I think it's experiences maybe that I've developed through some of the jobs that I've had when I was working in Germany. When I worked in, for instance, this top bar in Germany, the bartenders, like in the UK, bartenders are just another employee in some respects. It's changed days now, but for a long time it was. And when I worked in this top place in Munich, all the bartenders, they were like stars, they were like superstars. They all drove classic cars and they were all different characters. And it was like trying to bring a team of prima donna footballers together in a football club, in a sense, would be the analogy. But, I saw this in different places, and I kind of felt that, the meeting of minds is a very important part of how people gel, like they feel part of building off people. So you see a lot of friendship groups now, millennials and what have you, is an advocate, somebody that stands up as the knowledgeable one, and others will be guided by that knowledgeable one. And I guess that's always been through human society. There's always been that case. But I was a free spirit back in the day, traveling all these places. I didn't have the backup I might have had of being at home, where you have the community at home. I created communities wherever I went. I wasn't feel fully part of society, but it was always like a group of misfits that would come together, whether I would be working in the Greek islands or in Germany or in France and different countries. And I brought that spirit with me wherever I went, because I didn't have that before. When I left Scotland when I was 18, I kind of left everything behind. So I didn't really pick it all back up again. I picked up some parts back again and some friendships and what have you. But over the years, as my careers developed and some of these businesses that I've had, the restaurant, the delicatessen, I used that as pooling people together. So you had different experiences, I guess, like, you would bring an A-team together, and these were very powerful. I still use and still believe in this system today. So when I had the events company, that would be my third business, I very much had that as collaborations. So I would collaborate with academics in science, history. So I would have the chemistry and geology, the history, but then I would have the artisan food producers introduce craft gin or whiskey or craft beer producers to all these different people, and into the melting pot they would go, and everyone would benefit from these different skill sets. Going back to the restaurant, I felt that if I had started a business with a business partner who was also front of house, there would be the tete-to-tete. You would have these frictions because you were both coming from the same direction. So that's why I had the purpose of bringing from different areas, different skill sets would come together. And then there's less chat we'd normally have if you all had a similar background. So I think that was really the meaning behind it, and how you progress with that. You have different eras. You look at the famous painters in the Art Deco era. You think of all these different eras of the thinkers of the time, Greek mythology and philosophy. You think of the different eras. I think it's very much driven by, these peers where people are coming from different angles and they can add value to each other. I'm very interested in this as far as an era as collaboration. It follows throughout my life. So that's where I think it comes from.
Well, it's all about community today. I mean, look at Facebook, and everyone seems to be trying to be part of a community, and even multiple communities. So you were perhaps ahead of your time.
I am and I'm not, because in that sense, touching on the social media side of things, I can be very quiet sometimes, I think I take things quite differently. So just now we're in lockdown in the UK. In Scotland, we're still in lockdown. I go sometimes quiet. I went quiet before I started my Molecular Magician events company. It was very innovative. It was disruptive. It was very different. And the reason behind that was because I was having the collaborations in my lab. So I'm collaborating with a lot of people in the background just now. I'm just not talking about it a lot. So I take some things down offline and have these conversations offline quite often. So, some people just now, they want to be very busy and put themselves out there. And I think it's fantastic, some of the things that have been developed during this period. But for me, I feel sometimes it's quite good to go away, squirrel away and do your research and collaborate with people, and then you announce yourself. So this is what I'm doing in part of some of the future projects I'm working on just now. Many people do things differently, but that's the way I like to do things,
Join us around the 15th of every month for Food Travel Talk TV, our new live online talk show dedicated to the food and beverage travel trade. Every month, we invite thought leaders, opinion makers, and trendsetters to discuss important topics for the benefit of our industry. The show is designed to inspire us with ways to help each other to do business better. You can peruse upcoming shows and register in the event calendar on our website. Now let's shift gears a little bit and Can you tell our listeners how you got into spirits? Because we've been talking about you as a maitre d' at the front of the house of a restaurant and traveling around the world and tasting different dishes. And now you've made distilled spirits your career. So how did that happen?
It's interesting. I'm Scottish. I was born the last day of the year, Hogmanay, big celebration. And so I guess whiskey was in my life from an early age, And it's funny because in Scotland, it's not always known that people around the world are surprised about when they come to Scotland. Many people don't like whiskey. However, I did like whiskey. And so when I started working, I would go to a pub and stumbled across the Pot Still in Glasgow, very famous whiskey bar. But at an early age, I was drinking there half and a half. Really, as I got through my 20s and I was back home and I was with the influence of hospitality and restaurants, I started to build a bit of a collection in whiskey. And I had a whiskey room in my house. And over 10 years ago, each year I would have an annual whiskey tasting event and I would share with my friends, a bit like the advocate I mentioned earlier, I would share with my friends and talk about all these different brands and whiskies. And it would be a fantastic evening, about 20, 30 guys and girls, do some food pairing. And people would say to me at the time, you need to take this further. You are so passionate about this and you know so much about the stories in each of the distilleries. You really need to do something with this, And that's where I started to explore the third business of the events company. Didn't know I was wanting to do an events company, but I knew I wanted to find out more about whiskey food pairing. I would find myself as a hobbyist going to brand launches or dinners for whiskey, and I would see they would give a glass of wine at the main course. They weren't confident, super confident when it came to talking about the whiskies, but not so when it came to the food pairing aspect of it. So I kind of said to myself, you know what, that's interesting. So I squirreled myself away, spent far too much time on YouTube, reading a lot of books and publications that were coming out. It was after the Ferrana Dra era with the molecular cuisine split up, and people thought it was going to be an end of an era, but actually it really opened things out. So many publications came out. I was really inspired by this era, and the penny dropped for me really when there was some science that I found on YouTube, some publications, some blogs, some podcasts, and sewing it together. The wine science seemed to be further ahead than the whiskey science. So I made it my point to go into whiskey in a big way. And what happened when I did that, and I did some presentations, people sought me out and said, we want you to come and do a project for us. So I would go to like South Africa and do the Whiskey Live Premier Lounge experience, and whiskey professionals would turn around and go, who the hell are you? So I was kind of found myself in these platforms representing Scottish food and drink for experiences around the world, and as the ambassador, and all the brands started to turn around and notice and say like, oh wow. And it was not just whiskey, but it was craft gin was starting to come through and craft beer. So I found myself doing these molecular pairings of the different distilled spirits. I was educated in wine. I had taken during my career professional courses with wine and spirits. So I kind of just took the extension of that. Every opportunity I had, I would visit a distillery, I would visit a winery. So it would just, it was a hobby, passion that migrated across into opening a business that then would be seen by others in the industry. And that's where eventually I would be headhunted and started a career in working in Scotch whisky. So I was headhunted, and from there I ended up working for whisky and rum brands as well.
You have a whiskey room in your house today?
It's not so much a whiskey room, it's a few whiskey shelves. And you might find there's as much American whiskey as there is Scotch whiskey, because I made a habit for years traveling to the US to find so many different brands. The US liquor stores are huge places, and for us Brits, you don't really get such a big selection. So I decided to get involved. When you work in liquor, it doesn't matter what category. If you work in Scotch whisky, you can work in Irish whisky, you can work in tequila or vodka. Whatever you work in, you are going to be standing next to other people and other brands and so you do learn a lot. I learned a lot about tequila when I was traveling around Texas, believe it or not. I learned a lot about different spirits in different states or in different parts of the world. So you do naturally get to understand different liquids. So I decided I would take over some things in my bag and then bring back, but I would always it would be a dispute between the whiskey and also some wines, because I do love wines. So bringing some Californian wines that you can't get in the UK was always trying to bring some of these things back. So I do, yeah, I keep a collection of liquids. So, and also when you work for a brand, if you work in Scotch whisky, places, especially in the Netherlands, you find yourself small stores. If you do a tasting for them, they will give you something as a gift. So I have a large selection of Genevieve from the Netherlands, because the liquor stores, they always like to give Scotch whisky brands a gift. So yeah, I have all these small bottles from all over the place, you know, so it's quite fascinating to collect these. But yeah, it's not so much a whiskey room, it's developed as a liquor room, I suppose you could call it, you know.
Well, I do love whiskey, so when I get back up to Glasgow, I'm going to have to go out with you, and you're going to have to introduce me to the variances in Scottish whiskies, because I'm familiar with the smoky ones in the West and the islands. Then there's the other ones, but I'm sure you could probably tell me 24 different categories of Scotch whiskey, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's the classic regions of Scotch whisky broken down, you know, where you mentioned a couple. Really, Scotch whisky's developed so much with the different casks that you can find non-peaty in the land of peat. You can find in Speyside those rich, smooth sherry casks. You can find peaty whisky there. So it's very mixed up now. So yeah, there's a lot. The thing about Scotch whisky is there's over 400 aromatic volatile compounds. It's probably one of the most complex spirits in the world. So there is so much there to enjoy and to experience. And of course, I will take you around. I have some fantastic spots to take you to try some of the drams, because Glasgow is a fantastic city to taste Scotch whisky. It's the epicentre of Scotch whisky. More than 60% of all Scotch matures in and around 10 miles of the city. So the whisky might be made in Islay, might be made in Speyside, but it's going to find itself down somewhere near my city where I am just now, just beside the River Clyde on the river.
No interview today, right now, in this period of time we're in, would be complete without a discussion of COVID-19. And you were saying that we're probably in the greatest challenge of our lifetime right now, but also in change there's opportunity, and I couldn't agree more. What opportunities do you think are waiting for the Scotch industry after this all resolves?
This is a move from analog to digital. I mean, listen, there's still going to be a lot of difficulties, because even for Scotch whisky, for the distilleries, a lot of visitor centres, a lot of people were investing money, a lot of brands and a lot of distilleries were investing money into the visitor experience, because it was seen as such a large part of the experience, people coming to Scotland for the tourism, to come and visit the distillery as an opportunity to buy and experience. What a lot of people maybe don't realise is when people go to distilleries, some private tours that people come from the US, come all over the world, from China, from Hong Kong and Singapore. These people sometimes are going to drop a lot of money inside a warehouse as a special private tour tasting. So that is the Shangri-La of whiskey experiences for people, whether it's buying a cask or buying a very rare bottle of whiskey. So this is something that has to be thought through now. The opportunities really is Scotch whisky distilleries are very rural. So for some distilleries, it's not practical to just say we can just develop the local community, because sometimes the local community can just be literally a farm next door to you, and there's not much of a population. So it's not totally credible. But like the nearest towns and villages to spread and collaborate with some of the other businesses around there is an opportunity nearer the bigger hubs to do some collaborations with local musicians and artists and things like that. But for the revenue drivers, things need to move on to digital. And as we see a lot just now, there's a lot of virtual whiskey tastings and events. And it's something I was familiar with. I was already for over a year on Zoom doing tastings to the Midwest and the US and connecting with the teams in the US where I would be presenting. So a lot more of that. Obviously, people want to come back. It's for long term. It's going to take a while for some of the long distance flights coming from Asia and the US. The first instance is going to be rolled out as more to do with local visitors in the UK over the summer and into later this year. I think there has to be also some disruptive styles, because there's so much distilled spirit, so many brands, so many craft distillers. Some of the small ones are going to really suffer. There's no question there's going to be a suffering, and some people see opportunity. They might look to see people who have built brands and built distilleries and visitor centre, and bigger ones might find an opportunity to snap up, consolidate. So there might be a little bit of that going on. I think there's room for disruption. We have seen in the last few years small brands make very big impacts because of their nuance and how they have adapted. So there's some great brands that have done that, and they've shown to be bigger than out there than they really are. They've looked like bigger brands. So creating rich content and developing that content, being dynamic with their brand strategies. So there's Scotch, and the whiskey industry has long experience. People working in the industry have come from all different brands, maybe working for one brand, but worked in other brands. They know how to develop, and they have a nuance to this, so that it's very resilient. But I think there's going to be some pain in the short term. Yeah, I think it's about being a bit more disruptive and taking on board different collaborations and not using the same old techniques. You need to move with the times and develop as you go along. So I think that's some of the advice I would offer.
And you had some advice for doing tastings at distilleries at our Food Travel Talk TV show just a couple weeks ago where you participated. So I would encourage anyone who's in the situation of managing a tasting room, really of any size, and it doesn't matter, it could be beer, wine, spirits, even juices. Have a listen to that episode because it gave some really good and interesting advice about how things might be changing in the sampling arena. You're right. It's a trying time. It's a challenging time. You're right. Some of the smaller businesses will go away, unfortunately, but perhaps some of the better products will survive if those brands get purchased by larger, stronger companies. You must have a quote that you're known for. You have a lot of business experience. You're clearly a really popular guy. They even gave you a nickname, right? So what's the quote that you're known for?
I guess it's not a famous quote as such by somebody in particular, but I guess a lot of people will know me from what I say is, if it's not on Google or YouTube, it doesn't exist. Now, I know it's a bit quirky, a bit funny, but I find this, so many people come to you and they want the answer to something. So I'm traditionally a problem solver, strategy person, somebody that delivers things throughout my career. My job is to deliver things. And I find a lot of people will come to you and they're just simply looking for the answer. And unfortunately, in the learning process, which very much is part of the experiences I've had through life, is you need to research. And that research is the sinking in process of learning. When I say that, it's usually people that have come to me for a quick fix. Happens all the time. I would say it's probably more for older generation people, and it'll be friends and family that will come to me with this one quite a lot. And I just say, listen, if it's not on Google or it's not on YouTube, it doesn't exist. And it's kind of true. It's kind of crazy, but it is kind of true. So if you don't know the answers to things, get out there and research it, because it's not always just the answer. It's the research process is just as important in life sometimes to get to answers. I would always say that. So I think it's kind of like a mantra, that's worth considering. I've always taken the path in life where it's a little bit different, to go and travel the world at 18 years old when no one else was doing that in my year or in my school. It was something quite different. So I've always been a little bit left field, and that's where I get that from.
Have you heard of the website? Let me Google that for you.
No, I haven't, but I'm sure it's well used.
For those people who forgot to consult Google in the first place, they can simply go there or you can send them the link. It's really quite clever. It has a screenshot where it grabs the recording of you going to Google and typing in the words that you were looking for. You should try it.
It's quite incredible, and it is. I think it's maybe just part of, we live in this very fast culture where we're always just want snappy answers to things and let's move on and what have you. But we all know that really to things to sink in, I'm in education in a sense as well. So for people to really sink in and get something, it's not just good enough just to say a quick thing, send you to Google. You've got to actually kind of probably watch a few different videos on YouTube, or you've got to read through a couple of different articles to get what you really need out of things,
Sure. Well, they say YouTube is the second largest search engine. Stands to reason, right?
Yeah, you can learn to be a plumber, your electrician, any kind of household tasks, or how to fix your internet. These things are all there for you to discover, But also they can be very distracting. I might say that as someone comes across as very efficient, but actually there's a lot of inefficient time spent on YouTube, and I'll hold my hand up to that as well at the same time.
My problem is I just go down a rabbit hole because I go to YouTube or Google for one thing and then I see something else that's interesting. And then before you know it, an hour and a half has gone by.
Yeah, that's very much, I've experienced that. And that's why it's sometimes hard when people say to you, where did you get the inspiration for that? And then you've got to sort of think back and go, well, I did go down that rabbit hole. Can't, trying to work out at what point did you actually stumble upon that particular piece of science or piece of geology or piece of chemistry or something that I was looking for. You've got to go through your search history for that.
So what bothers you in business or life these days?
If I take time out from what's happened just now, but what I found, thing that was probably a pet peeve you would call, is self-importance. I travel an awful lot, an unhealthy amount of travel. You would say I would do in the last decade, the last 5 years especially. I would zigzag across the US, zigzag across Europe, zigzag across Asia. And I found where I went a lot of places in the public domain, people love to bring warts and all the things, and many people are confused in the world. I think it's attached to ego. People would basically, they don't like silence, so they would have to bring out all the dirty washing in public. I would find that I would have to put my headphones on a lot. I don't always like to use my headphones, but I would have to, because just people would have to bring out what they would do in their home. They would take with them to an airport lounge or to a bar, to a restaurant or a public place. It's just a pet peeve I would probably have. I don't know if it's a thing about getting older, but I just feel that people generally can be a lot noisier. It doesn't matter what region you're in, whether in Asia or in America, you can always find it. Maybe it's part of my British background or Scottish background, where we're brought up to be respectful and be in your best behaviour when you go about. I can't say that we're all in our best behaviour at times. I think that people don't seem to be able to internalise things, and they need to share with everyone whether they like it or not. So I think that's one of the, I would say, something that kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. Be interested to see what happens after this period where everyone has been in lockdown. Will people become a little bit more respectful and think a bit more internally about their things, and maybe not share everything with people and not be so all about them, as it were, So time will tell. We'll see what happens when we come out of lockdown.
Now, Ewan, I'd like to wrap up with a final question about the next chapter in your life. It's no secret that this COVID thing has changed economies, it's changed travel, it's changed how we interact as a human race. It's made a tremendous impact on the planet. And I know that you were very fond of an Albert Einstein quote that may actually help dictate the next chapter of your life. Could you share that quote with us?
Yeah, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So many people would have seen this across social media or LinkedIn or what have you as inspirational, and it very much, and I felt it was quite resonated recently when we look at how the UK stands with herd immunity, for instance. This is a stance, this is a feeling taken from science, maybe, that was from a previous disease. But maybe you look at progressive nations like New Zealand who wouldn't take that viewpoint. And I think using old solutions for new diseases isn't always the right way to do things. And it's for the future of business and what we do in the future. It's important to take that on board for all humankind, for us to put the man on the moon, for all the innovations that we've done in the world. You'll find the stories behind, and the disruptor companies, they had to find a different method. So they had to take away the building blocks and start a completely different route. So I very much believe, and there's some fantastic stories through history. People read some of the books about people behind some of the most innovative companies in the world and achievements in the world. I think it's very much prevalent, and it's a phrase for today. Let's not just look at these simple solutions like I was maybe mentioning before, trying to find simplified solutions. They're not always there. You have to do something that's quite different. It's a bit like when we take the science of immunisation, for instance. Who would have thought actually giving the disease would help to cure the disease? Back in the day, obviously, some people had to sacrifice for many people that live today. We look at the different diseases through the world that have happened, but we've had to take these very challenging stances to survive as humans. I think it's something to consider.
Indeed it is. Well, Ewan, I would love to continue our chat. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I feel like there's a lot more that we need to talk about, so I look forward to coming up to Scotland, sharing a dram with you, and learning more about your life and your stories.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to raising a glass with you in better times. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ewan. Thanks for listening today. The Eat Well, Travel Better podcast is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Our mission is to preserve and promote culinary cultures through hospitality and travel. By doing so, we empower local communities and entrepreneurs with the knowledge and tools needed to reach new food lovers and gain a competitive edge. Founded in 2003, now each year we shepherd a community of 200,000 professionals in more than 100 countries. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you can learn more about us, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our family at worldfoodtravel.org. Until next time, eat well and travel better.